Thanks for staying with us. Of course, that's the topic that we're looking at now, the rice pyramids. I only remember the groundnut pyramids, but I guess we'll get to that. In the course of the week, the president unveiled Africa's largest rice pyramids as part of the event marking the Rice Festival and the launch of the 2021-2022 dry season production. Of course, the president has assured that Nigerians, he's assured Nigerians that the price of rice in the Nigerian market is expected to fall with the launch of 13 pyramids of rice paddy. I want to be a farmer, but I'm not one yet. So we have a farmer to help us decrypt the figures. Yes. And everyone we're all supposed to have all hands on deck. Or is it all hands on land now? We'll talk about that later. African farmer Magaji joins us this morning. He is chairman of Agriculture and Agro-Allied Group of Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you. I'm now immediate past.
Immediate past.
Yeah, a dynamic lady has just taken over from me.
Dynamic lady has just taken over.
A lady?
Yeah.
Well done, lady.
Why am I not surprised that Alaro is excited about that? But, so, the rice pyramids. To some it is exciting. To some it's, what is this? What is it to you?
Well, the fact that we're producing is exciting. But that we're using pyramids, it's something to be concerned about. Why do I say we should be concerned about it? The average 45-year-old who was given birth to in the north cannot say they've seen a rice pyramid before because the pyramids have gone extinct 45 years ago.
So what would you be using, silos?
Silos. The former Minister of Agriculture, the current AFDB president, facilitated the building of silos. So Abuja has 100,000, metric tons of silos. So if the world has moved to silos, and guess what? We have the silos across the regions. Why are we building pyramids? If in fact the risk is high using pyramids, especially with climate change. And in Lagos on Monday, I think it rained. It rained on Monday in Lagos. And we're not expecting rainfall from the prediction till end of January. We'll just have 1 or 2. So my question is, just imagine the day it was launched. Climate change, what that means is that the rains will not come when it should come. And, if it rains that day, what happens to all those rice? What happens to our rice security? These are conversations that we need to begin to have. If it's in the silo, no matter the rain, it doesn't affect it. But we took too much risk that day. Too much risk. We are not paying attention to global trends, which is climate change. It's a good thing that we can produce the rice.
Well, thankfully it didn't rain.
Yeah, thankfully it didn't
rain. So the
rain.
Rice Festival has come and gone.
Yes.
But the president says that it means that the price of rice is going to fall in the market. Your thoughts on that?
Well, don't forget, it's what the data they give the president that the president will actually read out.
Yep.
That's what they gave to him. So, but the thing is, so let me give you a little background. I grew up in the 80s with my dad running 700-acre rice farm in Ekiti with combined harvesters, working, milling. So I have a good grasp, and I'm trained as an agri-expert also. It wouldn't affect
the price of rice.
The price of rice.
Why do you say that?
Because when you do the math around the fact that, 1 million bags, if I'm right, of rice that was produced. So 1 million bags of rice at 100 kg, that's 100 million metric tons. 100 million kg. 1,000 kg is 1 ton, meaning that's about 100,000 metric tons. if the data is right. So bottom line is that Lagos would consume that just like that.
Stop discouraging us now. This man, how
so
far?
bottom line is that
So you're saying Lagos can consume 100 metric tons of rice
just
in
like that.
how many days?
We do that. Christmas, Ileya period will consume this. And that's just one side. So
Just for the Lagos market?
just for the Lagos market. So if it's truly a 1 million bags of rice, even if it's 10 million. So the data, if you walk the data back, we've done a good job. But in terms of our food security,
it's nothing.
It can push it down for a little while. But also, my concern is that government has spent a lot of money, I use the word wooing, not attracting, wooing investors to invest in the value chain of rice. Many people have put their houses on mortgage. Many people have taken loans. Many investment has happened there. So when you push that rice into the market, the people who have taken loans from investors and banks will cry. Why? Because they did proposals, business plans to go into that cultivation. And so more like you're going to be dumping against what you've encouraged. So bottom line is that, yes, let's use the word, the common man can be happy they have rice, but the investors that has been encouraged over the last 7 years, it's bad news for them.
I don't understand.
Magaji.
My apologies, Anero. I don't understand. So it's bad news for them means?
It means that, so the ones that have produced, that are currently having their rice in storage to mill maybe 2-3 months' time, and now you go and dump in the market, you release it to the millers to mill. What happens to the genuine investors? To the people who have taken loans from banks that have projected that we will sell the rice at so price, the price will go down. So what that means is that many of them will not be able to meet the projection.
But Mr. Magaji, you know how these things work in Nigeria. Prices, when they go up in Nigeria, hardly go down.
Go down.
So no matter how many tons of rice is poured into the market, can you actually see the price going down?
See, the thing is that the rice will be ordered. That the millers will audit. It's election year. There's a agribusiness has its dynamics in election year. Some of us have leveraged it for about 16 years. There's a difference between campaign year and election year. So there's a 15 months window for practitioners to leverage. So what will happen is politicians will spend money for stomach infrastructure. It goes along with the game. So what that means is that this rice will be mopped up and stored.
Until next year.
Until next year. And don't forget, this is a campaign year. So one senator, one honorable, one chairman, all of them would have quota to say 1,000 bags must come to my local government. So when they mill it, it's meant for campaign. Even though, to be fair on federal government, they mean well. They mean well. But the implementation is not likely to go down like that.
Mr. Magaji, since we have you here and we're talking rice, is there has been a ban on imported rice. Is there still imported rice in Nigerian markets?
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
It's everywhere. You know, so some of us operate projects around border areas, including the north. So we still have these things coming in.
Okay.
And even if you go to the market, the price of foreign rice and local rice is almost the same. Local rice is even more expensive.
That's where I was going. That there's foreign rice in the market, and sometimes the local rice is even more expensive than the smuggled imported rice. Why is that so?
So, if you check...
I mean, government wants us to eat Nigerian rice.
Yeah.
So how come the one that they want us to eat, the one that is ours, that was not purchased with foreign exchange...
And that didn't pay duty, import duty and all...
is more expensive?
it's the cost of production, economics of production. So last year, the tractor operations increased.
What do you mean tractor operations?
So you want to rent a tractor to work for you. The prices went up by like 30%. Agrochemicals to prevent weeds and to protect from insects also went up by 20-30%. Fertilizer last year was practically almost not available. So the cost of production is going up. So as the cost of production is going up, and that is where funds need to go to. If you fund that value chain, then we'll be competitive.
Well, the president in that interview with Channels Television talked about the intervention of the federal government into this issue. He talked about importing tractors. He talked about even these fertilizers that you mentioned and all of that. So isn't that in any way helpful on its own?
So you see, there is what is planned and there is the real thing. So you see, last year was really, really challenging for practicing farmers. So I like to, I analyze, but I'm a practitioner. If you go around, if you feel the vibes, go around, go everywhere. Good intentions, good budgeting. They release the funds, but did it get to the people? Farmers. In fact, there's a particular bank that raised alarm also that when we're talking, BVNs, the anchors get the BVNs, present to the banks, goes to CBN filters, so they fund. The farmers don't touch the money, but the farmers didn't get the incentives through the anchor. But it was their BVNs they used to access. So when CBN came with reviewing or revising the operations of the anchor, it was based on some findings. So government means well. CBN means well. But there's a challenge where CBN is missing it. And that's why we need to talk about this. You don't see, I stand to be corrected, but the Minister of Agriculture was not, part of the flagging off. The Minister of Water Resources, the name was not mentioned in the pictures, except maybe the papers didn't report it accurately.
How important is that?
So, the mechanism in which the federal government and even CBN will reach out to the farmers is through the Ministry of Agriculture. The only platform where you can do dry season is the Ministry of Water Resources. Those are the river basins. So any dry season program only happens on the river basins. So if we're not seeing the Minister for Water Resources, we're not seeing the Ministry of Agriculture, and we're only seeing RIFAN. RIFAN is just an association. We're not even seeing the president of AFAN, All Farmers Association there. RIFAN is a component of All Farmers Association. So it means that it's very crucial, apparatus of government was not actively involved. And I've tried to apply also for anchor borrower before, which I always say I give it to Mr. Mefele, if it's a doctor. It's a well thought out program, but implementation really needs to be reviewed. So the Ministry of Agriculture is not fully involved. ADPs are involved, but in terms of budgeting for monitoring and evaluation, in the production cost, you won't really find it there. And when you see World Bank projects, monitoring and evaluation takes a good chunk, because for the project to come out, not just to complete the project, but basically to be able to, for future planning and implementation, you do these things. So the Ministry of Agriculture, the minister was not there, at least in the pictures. Ideally, the minister should be to the left or to the right of Mr. President. So it shows that there's a gap there. And if you go around the country, that gap is there. So sustainability may have some issues.
So then, I was going to ask you about sustainability. Does that, if the this assumption you're making at this position you're taking now, that the Federal Ministry of Agriculture is not fully involved. We saw some state governors, at the event. So one wonders if that doesn't count for something, because as we discussed in the earlier topic of housing deficit, it's the governors that have a bearing on the lands.
But when it comes to dry season programs, it is federal that owns a majority of the land and are farmed extensively in the north, across the country. So it's the river basins mostly owned by federal government, not the state. But the state can also deploy resources in helping to making sure that, because the farmers reside in the state. So yes, it helps, but how much rice, apart from like Jigawa, I used to farm in Jigawa, Yamidi, to put that out so that, there's no anki-panki around it. Yes, Jigawa, yes, Ekiti is also a core rice producing state, but how much rice is produced in the states of the governors currently that showed up? But if their coming is to project, to, encourage them to invest and support it, well taken.
Are you saying that Cross River State doesn't have any significant,
So Cross River has an ultra-modern seed production, to germinate. It actually helps rice farmers, take away the drudgery in it. But in terms of the size, I'm not sure they have it. But in terms of the technology to make it happen, they have invested heavily in it. But is it fully embraced by neighboring states? That's where we need to really be talking about. One governor comes with a brilliant idea, like the governor in Cross River. But other governors, are they embracing it? Because the ultra-modern facility he has is for everybody, not just for the state. So we don't have regional buy-ins into most of those projects, and that's why we have where we are. And that's why even CBN, if they come out to let you know, it's a burden that the states are not embracing this infrastructure, this opportunity that CBN is throwing on the table.
You spoke to the fact that we seem to be working in silos.
Yes.
It's a program of the CBN. One would expect, the Anchor Boroughs program, being an agricultural initiative, will be heavily embraced by the Federal Ministry of Agriculture and the Federal Ministry of Water Resources that you talked about. It raises a question on my mind. We've had this kind of initiatives over the years, and I think in the research that I checked out, we've had interventions to sustain agricultural programs in our country, such as this one, and for example, since 1959, with the Farmers Settlement Scheme of the pre-colonial or colonial masters at the time, or even the politicians that eventually took over. So, and over the years, I have seen successive governments, at different times, always wanting to sustain this program. So, are you saying, okay, let me not, put you in trouble if I can use that term, but how do we sustain this? Let it not just be another flash in the pan. There are those pundits out there who are saying, look, this is a terminal project simply because the bags have the name of the president today on it. That means that by May, June 2023, those rice are extinct, so to speak. Does that mean that the program is also extinct? So how do we sustain such brilliant initiatives? You are praising the CBN for the intervention. How do we sustain that kind of intervention so it's not just terminal to one government, it is something that is sustained for as long as possible?
The business models, that's number one. We must embrace business models that work with our environment.
Whose business models? When you talk about business model, don't forget you're talking about businessmen here.
Okay, so
government is not in the business of business, is it?
Yeah, but take for instance the model where the Anchor would gather like 20,000 farmers, 40,000 farmers, 50,000 farmers. The anchors don't even know the farmers. So it's better if you have an anchor of 50 100, 200 farmers. They stay in the same local government. They know each other's homes. They can track each other. That is what will work. So, and the millers are in every local government. You see, come rain, come shine, without government interventions, the local millers will mill. The rural farmers will plant. So, should we be scaling the local millers as against bringing new people to compete with them? See, when we're talking about these things, when, there was a broadcast where it was said that the middlemen were the problem of food security. The middlemen have more stake in agriculture than even the government. Because if the farmers don't bring produce to them, they don't earn money.
True.
They don't live. And they've been the ones funding the farmer. So when the farmer needs money, they go to the middlemen. I did this in Jigawa. I did this in Gombe. When you cannot afford chemicals, you can't afford a lot of things, you go take a loan from the middleman who will take back the crop from you. So instead of fortifying these institutions so that we can regulate them, we kind of project them as evils. But they've been funding this sector for years. Let me just paint it. When you take like tomatoes, you say, they're just buying, or rice, they're buying the rice, they're buying from farmers. They are no longer buying, the middlemen are no longer buying from farmers. The middlemen are giving them seeds to plant, giving them money, and taking a portion of the yield back as
repayment.
Now, the middlemen now have bought trucks for logistics. So that was why when along the line last year, they said we're not bringing some food to some areas in the country.
To the south,
it was effective because they control the value chain. Government does not control the value chain. If government is going to improve on that, they have to fund the existing guys so they can regulate them. So it's a lot of things that...
If that is to be done, but my apologies, Alera. If that is to be done, do you see the current infrastructure on ground, soft infrastructure, hard infrastructure, do you see them strong enough to sustain whatever it is that we want to sustain?
We actually have what it takes. We have what it takes.
Do we have the infrastructure?
We can still work with the current infrastructure.
But you just said now that one of the infrastructure, which is this value chain, is weak.
Yeah, so we need to empower the current infrastructure. Okay. We build on what we already have.
Not fight it.
Yeah, not fight it. We build on it. Because the farmers trust these people more than they trust the private sector and the government. Because
the bank.
Or the bank. They don't even want to hear the bank. The private sector comes with, brilliant idea. They rush to the farmers. They dash their hopes midway and run away. So the farmers trust the middleman. They call government intervention national cake because they are afraid that the implementation may not be thorough.
Okay. Now, in an interview that the president gave not long ago, he kept harping on, we've got to go back to the land. We've got to go back to the land. I'm sure you listened to that interview. How easy is it for us to go back to the land in light of all that you have said?
Well, it's quite easy, but the dynamics that will work has changed. Just like we're trying to build pyramids when we're supposed to be using silos. If you approach it with the old mindset, it won't work. I may not pass JAMB if I'm asked to go and write now because the syllabus I learned changed. Yeah. So what needs to be done right now is to look at, one, we need to redefine who are farmers. Who are the farmers we need to get on board?
Okay, define it for us.
Good. So there are the rural farmers who are about almost 60-year-old and above. They are dry bones.
60?
Yeah.
Well, that's old.
That's
old. To do farm work.
But that's the people we are still funding. They are dry bones. They've been used to, taking from government, not paying back, believing it's national cake. They are still the system we are oiling. We need to go for their children deliberately. We need to fund rural youths, not encourage urban youths. Go and fill a form online. It's not for the rural youth. The rural youths are the ones staying there. They are the ones who have seen their parents go through poverty, that they don't want to go through that cycle again. So until you are funding mechanization, small equipment, not the big tractors, that a farmer can use for 5 acres, 10 acres, and they can do it communally so that when I'm not using it, you can use it.
That's right.
If you are not funding mechanization, labor is scarce. Labor, Southwest and other part of the country, apart from the North, labor is from Benin Republic and Togo. The dollar exchange is not helping, so labor is the biggest issue. Then capacity development of youths. If you invest in a farm now, you're not likely to find the youth who has the exposure, to run it.
Exposure to
operate the farms. You're not likely to have it. So
doesn't that also say, my apologies for putting in, that we have a deficiency of education about agriculture, especially even with the youths themselves?
So you see, when you see this intervention, it should go directly to the colleges of agriculture, to the federal universities of agriculture, for institutions that fund agriculture. CBN should be heavily involved in, because you are giving farmers grants. Brilliant, good, we applaud it. But can you go and invest in the departments of agriculture to have top-notch equipment to work with?
Don't forget that even the students themselves don't seem to be interested in agriculture, because we had this interview with a professor in the university in Ibadan. She said, look, the students don't want to do agriculture. So perhaps that speaks to the kind of image we're giving to it.
So you see, the students majority want to do tech today, but we've not broken the value chain down. That, and I say this, any child in a remand home, as the child is leaving, should be brought into the agri sector, because the child is looking for a lifeline. The people who leave prisons should be deployed to drive tractors. Nobody will employ them. So the more we train them in the correctional homes, we prepare them for these value chains, the better. So the youths, we know they want tech, so they should be in distribution marketing. It's the rural youths that we should go for the vocational training, the 6334 that we used to have, the technical training, Europe, Hungary, majority of them are not graduates. Malaysia, all these countries have very strong vocational institutions. When you train them, they don't need to be a graduate. You don't need a graduate to drive a tractor.
No.
You need somebody to just operate it. So we need more strong vocational institutions that will train these people to prepare for it. The colleges of agriculture have the brilliant structure. I went to a college of agriculture. In year 1, you are to plant 10 crops and manage it, weed it, carry things on your head. It looks remote, but that's the reality is when you graduate. In year 2, you would have handled like 7 to 8 livestock. So when you go for your 1-year internship, you go to learn. And even your first 4 months in year 1, you go to learn. So these are institutions that need to be equipped so that anyhow, you would learn how to do these things. Apart from the university, apart from the core technical universities like the FUNAB and Co. Other universities, you learn theory, and in 6 months, goes close to your final year, they deploy you to go learn. What do you learn in 6 months? As against somebody who spent 4 months and was practical, 1 year and was practical. So we're using different models. And it's value chain. The urban youths can be pushed into value addition. The rural youths must first produce. We're getting it wrong in that, using that dynamics. We're still funding the old farmers, and the old farmers will not deliver. And I can talk from experience from many states. The farmers get this input and they sell. They sell. Everybody knows that. Everybody funding knows that. Every state governor knows that.
Okay. What is responsible for the high cost of foodstuff in the market? It's been that way now for about 3-4 months. What is the reason for it?
Largely climate change. Largely climate change. You see, because it's abstract, Nigerians...
3 onions, 500 naira.
Largely climate change. Then, after climate change, you will now pick the insurgency and banditry. But largely climate change. But because the concept of climate change is abstract. So last year in Kano, the rain stopped about 3 weeks to the ideal time. So this year now, we're going to have some grains expensive. But we're not paying attention to climate change. You remember some time ago when the river, that river at Bega dried up suddenly, that it made news. You covered it a lot. That happened in California when I was going through a training on U.S. foreign policy and food security. That happened. It wasn't new. But the things the experts were talking about was like magic happened. But Folsom Dam in the U.S., instead of just copy and what did they do? We just, package it around.
Copy and paste.
So climate change. Our dams have been receding for a long time. 6 years ago, a dam in Oyo State that I operate on receded by 20 meters. The figure didn't make any news. But it's an effect of climate change. So we don't have rainfall.
It affected food production.
It affected food production. 2 years ago, it didn't rain for 2 months in Southwest. It affected tomatoes, fresh corn, and co. And climate change, let me use the word lack of planning also.
Are we facing hunger?
This year, if we don't, deploy square pegs in square holes, we would have issues. Take, for instance, and I'll bring this out. It's projected that food will be expensive this year. However, suddenly, some of the parastatals now decided to fix the dam. So they shut down Kano Dam. So the farmers can't produce enough. Dadinkwa in Gombe, I operate in all these locations, so they can't, bamboozle me. You now, in the year, yes, you have a project, but you can suspend the project because the implementation is slow. So when you already have a prediction, 2 years, World Bank is saying it, AFDB, all these people are saying it, yet you now say you want to refurbish or rehabilitate the dam when we are not going to have enough food. You should allow the projects to run. So Kano is one of the biggest tomato producers in the country. Kano is not going to produce tomato this year. So a few months from now, you are going to see...
4 tomatoes, 1,000 naira.
Just wait for another 4 months.
No, we're not waiting.
So what needs to happen now is for government, is for CBN, because CBN, under Governor Emefiele, is really out there. So we need to go and support Southwest to produce, because when the North doesn't have, Southwest has. Places like Taraba, Jos, some places, and because of the climate, there's heat. If it rains, the first few rains in the North is like acid rain. I've faced losses on these things before. Before we mastered it.
So
Yeah. So the river basins in the middle belt, in some places in the North Central, we just need to be proactive.
So you just called. It sounds like you've just called the CBN governor, the CBN governor, and the CBN Father Christmas. But what's the responsibility for states and state governments in all of this?
Most of the states and state governments have, abandoned their responsibility, and they blame federal governments all the time. But it's the state government that is responsible for feeding, for farming. The federal government is just supposed to aid them. See, federal government, okay, before I go into that, you see, so the state government has the farmers. They don't fund farming activities. The local government don't fund farming activities. You blame government. So the state governors don't know about agric. And let me call CBN, challenge me with this. Especially a lot of southwestern states have not embraced the anchor borrowers. the opportunity is there. They've not. Just Southwest, because Southwest now has more informed commissioners like Ogun, Ekiti. You know, they are now the ones embracing it. But prior to like 2 years, they weren't accessing the funding because there's a counterpart funding that you put down. And the northern governors also have forgotten that you are growing commercial, you should be funding processing.
It sounds to me like this conversation is another one of those conversations, Alero,
that we have just started.
Well, I'm very sure that we're going to be calling you again because we are run completely out of time. African farmer Magaji is the immediate past chairman of Agriculture and Agro-Allied Group, the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Thank you so much for these perspectives and this illumination.
We wish you all the best in spite of climate change.
Oh, we're going to fix food this year.
Not just... Can we just take a break? We'll be right back. Thank you very much for the home stretch, you always say.